joining us this morning. Great to have you with us. We'll just allow a couple of minutes for other people to attend through. I know we are now live on YouTube, so there are a few people that had problems registering via Zoom, so you can just go straight onto YouTube there. Those of you that are joining us on YouTube won't be able to. I will just pause that because that's otherwise going to be loud. So yeah, I lost my train of thought there. That's the first error. We'll be very smooth after this, I promise everyone. So yeah, sorry, those of you that are on YouTube, that you won't be able to comment or see the chat, unfortunately, but I will pull out various bits that will be of interest to you, and then I will send the chat round to everyone that registered at the end of this anyway. For those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, although I'm sure we all are now, there is a chat button along the bottom of your screen. You'll need to click that, and then you'll need to enable viewed by hosts and attendees or participants. Otherwise, you won't be able to see the comments that people are writing. If you remove it off of just being converse with hosts, that would be great, so that everyone can see what you're saying rather than kind of sending questions to just Sue or myself. And then in terms of the chat, feel free to comment throughout the presentation with any questions and things like that. If we don't address them then and there, we will come on to them at the end. So I'll make a note of the questions. We've got a couple of questions for you as well throughout. So please feel free to get involved. It'd be great for us to know a bit about what is happening in your organisations, how you've adapted during this time. I think we really wanted to hold one specifically on corporate fundraising, because although challenge events and community are kind of more publicly talked about as being massively impacted by this, obviously the recession that is likely to follow will have a big impact on corporate fundraising as well. So we thought we'd host this, Sue, so that we could spread some positivity, didn't we, and hope for the future. So we'll cover a few different things. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. For those of you who haven't met Sue before or virtually met Sue, she's joining me today. So she is the Director of Partnerships at UNICEF, and I'm sure most of you are aware her team has secured some of the most strategic partnerships in the sector and have recently announced some good wins, which is excellent. However, the great thing about Sue's experience is that she's also worked at smaller and UK-based organisations. So she'll be able to give kind of a holistic view and has been catching up with a couple of counterparts across the sector. So although she's currently at a large organisation, we won't focus solely on what big organisations can do during this, because I know there's a couple of smaller charities and regionally based organisations that are on here today. So we're not going to ignore you or not cover that. And for those of you who haven't worked with me or Ashby Jenkins Recruitment before, we are obviously a recruitment agency, it's in the name, specialising in fundraising, digital and innovation roles across the entire UK. This webinar series is one way that we've been supporting the sector during COVID. Obviously, there are still a lot of changes and challenges to come, but any way that we can support, we will. So if anyone has any ideas following this of how we can better help the sector, please do get in touch. We've got a selection of blogs on our website, which are also useful, so worth checking those out. And of course, we still do recruit for roles, and the market is starting to come back. So if you have any recruitment needs in your team, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Obviously, I'm naturally going to say we're the best at what we do, but there are also reviews on Google and on our website that testify to that. So you don't just have to believe me, because people aren't generally inclined to believe recruitment consultants, which always is surprising. Okay, so Sue, did I miss anything off there, or shall we head straight into the slides?
No, I think that's great, but thanks for inviting me today, Ashby. It's great to be here, and looking forward to the next 45 minutes or so.
Excellent, great. Okay, well, let me share this app for everyone. This is where sometimes I'm very smooth at doing this and sometimes I'm not. So that's a sneak peek that everyone's got there. So we'll go straight into this. So this is what we'll be talking about today, which we've kind of gently touched on. I'll let Sue talk through the kind of structure of what we're looking at.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at the sector over the next 12 months and what we think it's going to be looking like for corporate partnerships. And as part of that, we'll just have a look at some of the great work that's going on at the moment. We'll also then look at account management, and talk about the kind of things that you can be doing across account management to make sure that you're retaining and delivering on those partnerships. We'll then move into new business, which is, I know, a really important topic for many of you. And then we want to talk a little bit about virtual fundraising and stewardship and how that's playing an important part now in everything that we're doing. And then moving on to looking at how we're preparing for the recovery, and tips and things that you can do to make sure that you know, you're looking after yourselves and getting the right level of support and being resilient as well. So that's what we'll be sharing today.
Perfect. Okay, and so we'll move initially onto the next 12 months and what that looks like. So Sue, this is exciting. Let's go through.
Yeah, great.
We're not going to hold you to any of this, Sue, I promise. It's
yeah.
not, although this is being recorded, we won't hold you responsible.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's what will the environment be like for corporate giving in the next 12 months? I think that is the killer question at the moment, and that's the one that we're all trying to work out. I think that a lot of people have been looking at the reference of the global financial crash back in 2008, see if there's been, you know, anything that we can learn from the way that the market moved at that time, where we did see quite a significant drop and then flattening off. I think there's quite a lot of debate at the moment as to what the shape of the next 12 months is going to look like and what the shape of recovery is going to be. But for sure, we're seeing a decline at the moment. We know that charities are seeing new business declining right now. But at the same time, you know, I think there's one thing I would say is that we should also be optimistic. I think that this is a situation, this is a pandemic that has impacted everybody. So what we're talking about in terms of our organisations to our supporters does have resonance. But I think, you know, looking at the beginning of this whole pandemic, it was very much focused on what was happening in the UK, to our health services, to getting supplies out there. So certain organisations and certain parts of the sector were very dominant at that stage. For our own organisation, international development then became more relevant about 3 or 4 weeks into the crisis. But for lots of organisations, it's going to be time coming up in the future for when their organisation starts becoming relevant to what's happening, because they will be part of that recovery. So that's why I say that there's reason to be optimistic. There's also corporates that have done very well out of this crisis, and you know, the obvious ones are the supermarkets, financial services and e-commerce, tech and ed tech and gaming, online retail and home entertainment. So there are new sectors or new corporate sectors that I think will be an interesting opportunity for many of us going forward. So you know, I think it's also going to be really interesting to see what happens to Charity of the Year. I know that a lot of the Charity of the Year partnerships have been paused or are on hold at the moment. And you'll all know that with UNICEF, EasyJet is one of our key partners. In the travel industry and the hospitality industry, there's been such a huge impact that yeah, we've seen a real impact in that sector. So I think it's all about sort of really working hard with your current supporters and donors and looking at how you work through that recovery with them.
Yeah.
I think the other.
Oh, sorry, Sue. I was going to say, I guess the challenging thing is that so many charities have those kind of Charity of the Year calendars or rely on that kind of to feed into their pipeline. And actually, not saying that needs to be ripped up, but there's so many sectors that wouldn't have traditionally been on there that now it's probably a really good time to start doing research into those new areas like education tech, as you mentioned. Or
exactly so. So I think, you know, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the new biz section when we get to that, about the whole prospecting and research, but there's some good resources that I can help to share after this today in terms of insights.
Great. And so, guys, sorry, I was going to say there's a little chat question at the bottom. I meant to say that as we introduced. So just in terms of if your organisations have already started suggesting new sectors to go after, or whether you're moving away from new business, focusing more on account management, it would be really good to get your input and share ideas on there, because I know in previous sessions a lot of smaller charities or different charities have learned from each other. So if you can update on what your organisation's doing, or any sector focus that you're having at the moment, that would be wonderful. Sorry, Sue, carry on.
No, that's great. That's great. So I guess, you know, what I'm saying is there's reasons for optimism, but I think realistically there's going to be challenge in the market, and it's going to be about being pragmatic as to where you put your resources. But some of the other successes that we have found have been around the corporate foundation giving. Ashby, you mentioned a couple of successes that UNICEF has had recently, and those were in the corporate foundation space. So I think this is one to watch. These have obviously been emergency donations that we've had, but I think it will be really interesting to see what emerges within that space as we start to move through the next few months. Yeah. One of the other things that we have also seen, I'm sure you're all seeing across the sector, is the greater use of contributions in kind. And so, you know, I think this is a way that organisations can show their support, mobilise their assets to be able to do something really good to support the recovery. So just very recently, actually, we were the beneficiaries of a donated flight from Virgin that was taking really important emergency supplies down to Johannesburg. So, and that's probably not the sort of thing that classically we have done at UNICEF, but we're being more flexible in our approach in terms of contributions in kind. So I think that's quite an interesting thing for people listening today to think about. I think also as we start to go forward, we will start to see that there's more time at the moment, I think, for organisations out there to reflect on what their practice is in the charitable space and the sustainability space. So I think that we'll really start to see the emergence of corporates showing greater accountability, and that where their employees, where they're communicating with their employees, there'll be greater influence in terms of what employees want, what the public wants, and what stakeholders of corporates want. So I think we'll start to see perhaps a more sustainable types of corporate engagement going forward from here. And then the other thing that is obviously changed for all of us is the need for us to be virtual all the time at the moment. And that could change as we start to come out of lockdown, obviously. But I think, you know, there's been a lot of learnings that we've had over the last few months in terms of what works well virtually and what doesn't, and how do we deal with socially distanced cultivation and stewardship tools. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. But that's a world that we're all going to be living in, I think, certainly for the next 6 to 9 months, if not longer than that. So those are some of my thoughts around what the next 12 months looks like. But I would go back to, you know, those key points about really being realistic about where to put your resources and being pragmatic about that, but do retain that optimism as well.
Yeah, no, I remember, I mean, talking of optimism, perhaps unfounded, when this first started, I was like, oh, it'll be great. I think we'll be back to normal in June. We'll all come out of lockdown. It'll be wonderful. Here we are.
Yeah, I know. At the beginning of all of this, when we came home to work from home, and I was thinking, oh, I think I'll see everybody in a couple of weeks. But it's been obviously a really different story to that. So yeah, but anyway, let's just have I thought it would be useful just to share some of the kinds of things that we're seeing in the marketplace at the moment. I just talked about in-kind giving, just some examples here. This one, British Airways, and then doing a drop of goods, about 200,000 goods, I think it was, to NHS hospitals and care homes. So this is a way that they have used, because things are financially tight for them, using that in-kind giving. So something I think that's useful for all of us to think about in terms of what our supporters might be able to provide.
Lydia on the comments actually has said that they've been
Yeah.
getting quite a lot of support in terms of gifting
Okay.
kind and then
Yeah.
focusing on stewarding partners.
Yeah. And in fact, one of our main partners, Unilever, obviously they're in the hand washing space, and we've been working very hard with them, and we've seen significant contributions in kind coming from Unilever. So again, probably not the way we've always worked with them in the past, but I think the pandemic and what it means is that people are just working differently. They're being more agile. They're being a bit more open about opportunities. So because they want to provide alternatives if they are financially challenged. So so that's great to hear that others are benefiting from that as well. So corporate matching, that's always a popular approach. I know that donors love corporate matching, and I love corporate matching because it's always such a great message. Just given a view of a few organisations there that have had corporate matching schemes, but again, it would be interesting to know from others on the call today whether they've seen any trends in that area. But I think that's something that hopefully we'll see continuing throughout the next 12 months and beyond. We've also got businesses banding together. An example here from Milk Your Moments, which is a campaign. It's a combination of industries that have come together, and they're doing quite a nice little digital piece here. So you click on to their site and they donate £1 to, it's actually Mind that they're donating to, and then it gives you some prompts to text to donate additional donations yourself. So it's quite a nice way of bringing people together, enhancing your brand, and obviously donating to fantastic organisations. And then things like, we call it solidarity comms here, again, where organisations have got space, ad space. We've seen quite a lot of organisations providing that at much reduced rate or free of charge to be able to allow charities to get their key messages out there. So this example is actually from Trainline, using Twitter to spotlight some of the local charity activities. So so there's a lot of good stuff going on out there. So I think it's quite useful to share that. And if we just go to the next slide now.
Sue, sorry, just in terms of the solidarity comms and corporate matching. You know, marketing and fundraising teams sometimes have their disagreements about what's relevant to push out and what isn't, and what value that needs to be at. For any organisations that are on this call at the moment, what would you advise them in terms of, I guess, managing that challenge? Maybe the departments have been a bit tricky in their relationship up until now. You know, how does that work at UNICEF? How do you ensure a good relationship?
I think it's about having the honest, upfront, open conversation with your brand or communications colleagues about what's appropriate for you as an organisation. And so we would have that very open conversation with our colleagues about, does something work for us? And we wouldn't always accept everything. So it's really about, does it work for you? Is it the right channel and format for you? And what's the benefit that you are going to get from that? So yeah, open dialogue is what I would say.
Right, yeah, that's fine. And I'd actually be interested if anyone's happy to share. This may sound like a very obvious question, but in terms of whether your organisations have set up kind of COVID task forces with your heads of comms and heads of fundraising or directors to make sure those relationships do glue together, I guess now better than ever before. So if you don't mind sharing, that would just be useful to.
Yeah, no, that's great. And certainly we did that at UNICEF, and we had an emergency task force in those early stages, which has now sort of gone off into different work streams as we've moved along with the crisis. So, but I think that it certainly worked very well for us and set the right tone right from the beginning. And I think that collaboration across departments is really critical. So and something we work very hard at UNICEF actually. So and across many organisations that I've worked in.
Yeah, it is one of the most challenging areas. That internal stakeholder management is always so key. Sorry, so recent activity.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd share a few recent activities. You may have seen, I'm sure you've seen a number of these, but obviously Big Night In, moving to that real kind of virtual space, lots of sponsorship activity coming in there from certain organisations. And then we've got the Great British Tech Appeal. So this is Vodafone UK and Bernardo's, launched at the end of May, but asking the public to donate their unwanted gadgets to give to disadvantaged families and charity workers. So I think that that's a really interesting use of engaging the public in something that they can be very active in doing. So I think that's been, it'd be interesting to know if anybody knows how successful that has been, because I saw that that had launched quite recently. At the smaller end, we know we've got Cadbury's Foundation that have been launching a new fund for local charities in the regional area of West Midlands around Birmingham, where they're headquartered. And then we've got organisations like Schroders that are now sponsoring Battle of the Bricks, which is Jamie Murray's men's tennis tournament that's happening anytime now, I think it is. So there's some good activity going on there. And then upcoming, I thought this was quite interesting, is UK chefs, restaurants and cafes are holding an auction, an online auction, and this is on the 1st of July. And obviously this is a sector that's been really, the hospitality sector, the food services sector is an area that's been really badly hit through the pandemic. So, so I think it's great to see these guys coming together, different brands here coming together for a live stream on Zoom. So they'll be making their money through ticket sales and auction, and I believe that's for Action Against Hunger. So, you know, I think there's lots of exciting things going on. I think there's a lot of learning that we will get in terms of these types of event activations over the coming months. So it'd be really interesting also to hear from people that are with us today about virtual events and activations with corporates that have worked well, and if they can share any of those great stories.
Yeah, I just seeing Dishoom's logo on there. I mean, I'm sure after this it'll be impossible to get a table at Dishoom without queuing for 3 hours. It was hard enough before. It's a shame. So on to account management then, in terms of what people should be focusing their time on to get the best results. What you've been doing at UNICEF.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you know, I think this is obviously a really important area because it's all about, you know, as much as you can, retaining and growing your current partners. They're the partners that are with you. They're the partners that have committed to you, and probably many of them you'll have been working with for a very long time and raised a lot of money with them. So, so I think it's really kind of engaging more deeply with them as you can around that commitment. But I think also, you know, that I think the way that we respond now will really set the tone as we work through the recovery, and keeping that really solid partnership together. So, and it may be that your partners are having to change their focus a bit because they've got their own staff going off on furlough. They just haven't got the manpower and resources to be able to work with you on the kind of activation engagement activations that you might have had in plan. But I would say it's just about being patient, being that kind of valued partner, and, you know, understanding that their focus might shift, but sticking with them through all of that. And I think if you go on that journey with them, then that can only make your relationship stronger as you go forward. So yeah, I think that, you know, across the experience that we have had, is that being honest with partners about the changing needs of your organisation is really important. Being very upfront with them, about how this may change or divert funding at a later stage, if some of your programming or service delivery has changed and partners are tied into that. It may be the opportunity to talk to them about, are there other ways for them to be flexible with their funding? So those may be the opportunities that you have with your current accounts. I think it's also really understanding what the recovery process is going to look like for your partner's business as well, so that you can really nuance the way that you're talking to them and working with them, and also really sort of think about what are the new opportunities that we want to be putting forward to them. And we have used our emergency appeals with our current accounts, and we've had some success with some of those organisations. But with other organisations, they're really in a process of just being on pause right now. So I think it's being really respectful of where they're at, but being that long-term valued partner. And yeah, I think it's also a great opportunity for you to be discussing. So you've got this commitment, you've got a charity of the year at the moment, that might be over 1 or 2 or 3 years. If you're in a pause situation, is there an opportunity for you to extend that partnership out? Is there an opportunity for you to increase the potential commitment from that organisation? I have been talking to the colleagues in other organisations where they have successfully done that, where the partnership has gone into pause, but they've had commitments back from those organisations that they will continue to support them, but it will be a longer time frame. But they had increased their commitment in terms of the kind of donations that they're willing to support for the longer term. So I think there's some real positives to be had there. Yeah. But it's just about really sticking with it with your valued supporters.
Yeah, Daisy actually from Dementia has said around there, in terms of their new business focus, they're looking at grant opportunities because they're expecting corporates to show more loyalty to their existing partners and stay with them, which makes complete sense. And sorry, I had a problem with my chat, so it wasn't loading despite my frantic clicking.
Okay.
Now it's come up to date. So Priya actually asked a little bit about the corporate matching examples. Can you just go into a bit more detail? So what does that kind of, I guess, contain? What does a standard corporate matching thing look like?
Yeah, I mean, it will vary actually from organisation to organisation. So, I've been involved with different corporate matches in all the different sorts of organisations that I've worked in. So I think the Spotify one that I showed, you go in there and you can, if you donate to their chosen foundation, then they will automatically match your donation if you go in and donate. So that's the way that one works. I've been involved with others where we have agreed a match fund with a partner and gone out and used that as part of a campaign to raise more funds. So it really varies, but it's certainly worth looking around into the likes of sorry, I've got my
if there's no cats or children that have run in yet, we've done well so far. So.
Yeah, sorry, that took me off track for a moment. So have a look at some of the organisations, like I put Google up there and Apple. Look through theirs. There will be different criteria, but it's always worth keeping your eye out for new match funding opportunities that are coming about, and also talk to your partners about if that's something that they would consider as well.
Yeah. Great. And thank you for a couple of guys, Becca and Daisy. You've shared a bit more information about the match funding scheme, which is great. So that's really helpful. I will send the chat round after this as well, so that you can go into that and access those. But yeah, that's really kind of you. Anna, I will come to your question at the end as well, just so that we're kind of going through the slides. So onto the wonderful new business area at the moment, which, you know, is probably where the most uncertainty sits. So we asked this a little bit earlier as well, but
Yeah,
let us know
yeah.
what your charities have done in terms of new business, and if there have been any successes, it'd be great to comment and share with people. But Sue, in terms of new business, what are you advising?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it'd be really interesting to hear where other organisations are at with this. For us, it's been something that we have been 110% focused on since the beginning of the emergency, and it's an area that I'm really keen for us to ensure that we've got the right capacity going forward, because I think we all know that this is a long game, that we're looking 12 to 18 months out quite often for securing and committing new partners. So my feeling is that it's very much about investing for the future right now. Now, to this emergency stage, at UNICEF, we've done lots of approaches and outreach, and that's because, as I was saying earlier, the pandemic is something that is relevant to everybody. Everybody's been involved in this. So yeah, it's about being specific with your outreach, but in general, we've had, you know, quite warm responses, lots of no's, a few yeses, and I'm sure that's the same for others that have been working hard in this space. But I think it's about being able to be prepared to pivot your prospecting strategy and diversify. And we were talking earlier about some of the new sectors that are emerging. And actually what we do as part of our team is a sector by sector approach, and that allows us to specialise the new biz team that we've got to specialise more, so that they can really understand the nuances of those sectors, and how the different programmatic work that we've got really is sort of matches with those sectors as well. So so I think, you know, it's really important, I would say, to keep your foot on the pedal with new business, to really use your key assets to help you to stand out appropriately as well. What do I mean by that? I mean, give you examples of some of the ways that we've worked this. So obviously we're very much in that virtual world at the moment, but we've tried to look more broadly at vice presidents, advisors, trustees, our chair. How can we mobilise those key people and ambassadors as well, so that we can create the right outreach, so that we can get those meetings, so that we can have those initial conversations, so that we can have those follow-on conversations. We've also looked at how we can use our programs team, our frontline team, to have virtual chats and conversations. We've set up webinars. So those are some of the ways that we have gone out to the new business approach through the last few weeks. And it's interesting actually, because people have got more time at the moment in terms of the diary, because they're at home, they're working from home. So I think that has been a really great learning for us actually, that it's all about using your additional assets around you, as well as your own personal relationships, of course.
So what are your thoughts? Because one of the things that obviously major donors in terms of individuals do really well is those kind of leveraging peer-to-peer asks.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in terms of, obviously you've mentioned trustees, but in terms of existing partners that are potentially really close to organisation, they obviously have friends that work in other businesses and other sectors. Is there merit in trying to leverage those relationships where you have really close relationships with your partners?
I think potentially yes. I think it's a case by case basis. I think that you need to understand what's going to work in terms of that relationship development. Is that partner going to be happy? Is it relevant? Are they going to be happy to do that? Are they going to be comfortable? But where you've got those opportunities and it feels right, then yes, I think that is a really good idea. And actually we have been talking with one it's actually a foundation partner of ours, that we're talking about getting introductions to corporates that they're connected with. And so that's kind of peer-to-peer approach we're making through one of our foundation partners. So yeah, definitely, you know, if it's right for you, then definitely go for that. Yeah,
I suppose now is the time to try these things, isn't it? You know, if your pipeline's looking dry, you might as well.
Yeah. But I think it's you know, it's always been nuanced with your approach and appropriate. And I think also, you know, you were mentioning earlier, and we talked about a couple of the successes that UNICEF has had through the corporate foundations space. And one of the things that I think you should really be focusing on is, if you have had new business success through this period in whatever shape or form that is, then be thinking about how you're going to retain and grow that relationship going forward. I think that's really important, because they've committed to you at this stage, and you know, I think that converting for the longer term is something that is much easier to do once you've got that relationship really embedded. So really focus on that.
Ian on the comments actually has put, he works for an NHS charity, and they've obviously been inundated with kind of offers of support from corporate, and have obviously kept all those details, and we'll be following up. It's a great low-hanging fruit. It's a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's really important to keep up to date with where your programming or service delivery is at. It may well be that the shape of that has changed, and that you've got new or different offers that may now have become relevant to different organisations that you might not have considered before. And then think about some of your really key specific areas. One for us at UNICEF is education, and the fact that 1.5 billion kids worldwide are out of school at the moment has been a really big focus for us. So we've put a lot of effort in looking at who are all the different kind of partners that potentially sit around that space. And so that's why I was mentioning ed tech and mobile tech, because those are the kind of areas that we're potentially interested in, because it fits so well with one of our major areas of our mission. The other thing that I think is also important to have a think about too is, when you're in new business negotiations, do you want to think about the type of flexibility that you're offering in the future that you might not have done in the past, but do you want to think about how you might work things differently when you're going through negotiations? So, I mean, that will be a personal decision for each organisation, but something that I would recommend that you think about. And I think for those organisations that haven't been very active in new business during this stage, because it may not have been relevant for you to do it right now, I would very much advise to be thinking about, so when you get to the autumn, when you get to the back end of the year, plan for that now. Think about what you need to be researching, what kind of resources you need to be developing, what kind of content, and how you will go about working with all of that when it gets to September, October time. So use that planning stage, and you know, give yourselves the opportunity to really decide on what are the best things for you as an organisation. Are there things that you can dispense of? Have a really good clear out and rethink is what I would advise.
And in terms of the negotiations, would you advise that around, because a lot of large charities have minimum partnership values, which you know might be set at 100,000, you know, for the large ones. Is that negotiation around that, or in terms of level of kind of press coverage and things that would be involved in the partnership?
I think it's potentially all of those. You know, it's really what you feel as an organisation would be right for you and would be right for the supporter that you're prospecting. But I think it's just knowing, you know, what level of flexibility you've got will help you in terms of your outreach. that's an individual organisational decision, obviously.
Perfect. Okay. And then virtual fundraising and stewardship.
Yeah, so just moving across to that, as we were saying earlier, we're now in this virtual world all the time, and there have been ways that we have been doing stewardship with virtual stewardship across some of our key partners. And one of the examples that I've got here is an activity or a partnership that we have with BT, and an additional activity that we're working with BT on now, which is our learning passport, which is all about education for children in refugee camps and children on the move. Now, it was really important for us to try and bring that to life for the thousands of BT employees who have previously done event type engagement activities for us that obviously they're not able to do at the moment. But what they have been doing at BT, or what they did do, is had a very big online meeting that would normally have been a face-to-face meeting, but we were able to secure space on that internal online meeting to be able to demonstrate what we were doing with the BT donations, and we used our internal emergency specialist to provide a really great oversight of that, and repurpose some of our content that we have around that programmatic activity so that we could do something that was really special and specific for BT. So I think if there are ways that you can do that for your organisations, then I think that is something that would be really helpful. We've also been able to tap into some of our ambassadors that have also done thank yous for us. So, you know, there are ways and means, and try and think creatively across your organisation about what assets you've got and how you can utilise them. And perhaps using different people that you haven't used before, or where you might have done field visits, how can you get people virtually into the field? And that's something that we're looking at UNICEF. We're also looking at how do we do, we've just very recently actually done a visit. We have a very big supply division in Copenhagen where all of our emergency supplies go through. So just recently we did a live event coming from that supplies division for some of our key supporters and organisations that we're currently talking to. So I think these are great engagement opportunities. So I would really advise that you think about, you know, how can you utilise your own internal assets differently from how you would have done before, to introduce or engage people more deeply in your organisation.
Yeah. And just a couple of the different examples here, guys. So the Prince's Trust, they have Million Makers, which you might be aware of, but that is normally a really big thing for them in terms of getting corporates involved in pitching for ideas to set up new kind of areas of work in their organisations. And what they have done, and what I've seen a lot of, I guess, smaller charities do, is perhaps look at pausing on doing those kind of things where you have corporate volunteers all coming together to raise money through, you know, I know a lot of hospices do charity shop takeovers and things like that. The Million Makers has actually adapted really quickly. So I spoke to someone there, a lovely lady called Laura, I don't know if she's on today, but they have had the same concept year on year and have kind of been looking at innovating, but this has really given them a chance to innovate and try something new. So before COVID, they had 40 companies signed up. They actually have only lost 4 of those during COVID lockdown and that involvement, and they're still having new people sign up to, or new companies sign up to them now. And they shifted their whole comms plan and marketing strategy to virtual, kind of not instantaneously, that would be over-promising, but really quickly. So this program traditionally has loads of in-person events and recognition events. So they've switched that all to be online now, which has saved them between kind of 30 and 40k. So they're still setting corporates the same fundraising task, which is to raise 10 grand each, but they've reduced those costs down, and the level of interest, the way that they've kind of shifted their marketing has been around staff development and keeping people engaged while they're on furlough. So that's a really interesting one. So if you are kind of pulling any of those corporate volunteering money-making activities, it's worth actually readdressing that and seeing whether there's something different you can do. included Chuff on here, so a really small regionally based charity. So for those of you who are from a kind of similar organisation, they developed a really quick virtual fundraising guide. They've also seen a lot of kind of success from IT companies. So and I would say the recruitment sector is not great in terms of big partnerships at the moment, but those IT recruiters are still doing really well. So if you're still interested in that area, go for the IT ones. So they've seen a lot around that. Blesma launched a new gaming platform to engage with their corporate partners, which is really interesting. So if those of you who've not been on our gaming webinar, that is actually, there are ways to engage corporates with that and live streaming, so it's worth just going and watching that. But they've offered loads of rewards and incentives to get corporate partners fundraising and things like that, which has worked well. One bit of advice from them is just for all corporate fundraisers to really familiarize themselves with the tax benefits of corporate giving. So I'm sure you're all aware of those, but if any of you aren't, it's worth doing research into that, because that's just another way to, I guess, sell in the benefit of working with a charity. And then just down the bottom, so esports is something that's probably more accessible to the larger organizations, but partnering through kind of esport fundraising and sponsorship for your virtual events is still possible. Women for Women International did a big virtual event which raised 90k, but I believe they got corporate sponsorship. So sponsorship's not dead, it's not over, it's just looking, I guess, at the changing completely the ways that we've done things up until now. So just a few quick examples of ways that some charities have adapted. And then preparing for the long game, Sue. So this is really important stuff for everyone's kind of well-being.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I know that, obviously in corporate fundraising space, it's all about face-to-face interactions a lot of the time. And I think we've all been really missing that, actually. Certainly I have really been missing the office interaction. So yeah, I think it's about taking that time to look after yourself over the coming months. It's going to be a long game, and you need to be able to remain resilient. So I think it's really about pacing your work. As I said earlier, it's about being pragmatic and thinking about where you best prioritize your time. And also take a while to think about, probably most of us that are here today have gained quite a lot of time back from not commuting. Certainly I have a long commute and I don't have to do that anymore. And I'm trying to now think about how I'm really using that extra time that I've been given. And I'll be honest, quite a lot of it's gone into work, and I want to try and sort of reposition that a bit as well. And I think that's really important for everybody, just to think about how they're using their time. The days can be long, particularly when you're prospecting, particularly when you're working with corporate organizations that are also working long hours. So I would say, really try to set some structured and achievable work plans. And I think it's really important also to feel that you've got the support and backing of your senior leadership. Certainly, I have very much felt that across UNICEF. But I think that is something that is really important for all of you, because this isn't about short-term gain quite often with corporate fundraising. It's about playing that longer-term game and being able to invest in that future. I think also, there's an opportunity, if you don't already, and it would be appropriate for you to start thinking about how you use other people across your organisation to help you in that fundraising effort. So can you put more of your service delivery people in front of donors? Can you use some of your senior team more frequently as well, so that you're sharing the load and that they're also learning about the challenging job that it is in terms of raising income. The other thing that I think is really important too is using your professional network. So I think this kind of opportunity is fantastic. So thank you, Ashby, for setting these series up. I know there are other networks out there, but I think it can be quite isolating sometimes when you're on your own. So just to be able to reach out to colleagues, networks, people in other organisations, just to get a sense check of what's happening in the sector, how you're dealing or how you can deal with a specific challenge, talking that through with somebody else that can give you, you know, a clear view on something, I think is really helpful. So I think, yeah, that real kind of learning from each other, I would very much advocate. And also, actually, it's quite nice because we have quite a few of our colleagues work in London and they might live quite closely together. So some of them are starting to meet up, socially distanced, meeting up, but they are starting to do that. And I think that's great, actually, because I think people are feeling that they really need that. So, so yeah, if that's appropriate for you, then, you know, I think that's a great idea too. So I guess it's also really important that as you make successes, however big or small those are, that you celebrate them along the way as well, because I think it's really easy to be going at this fast pace. Something comes in, that's great, and then you're moving on straight to the next thing. So I really would say stop and pause and celebrate that, because that really will help build your resilience as well, because, you know, we know it can be a lonely game at times, and there are failures, there are things that don't happen when we want them to. So it's about being able to have that energy ready for when you're facing that. So I guess, you know, I would say be realistic about what you can achieve, be pragmatic about what you can achieve, but do be optimistic, because I think there is opportunity, and yeah, it would be great, you know, to hear about some of the successes that you're starting to have now as well, so that we can, you know, as a collective, start to build on that success. I think that would be great. So so that's mainly what I wanted to talk about today, Ashby.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, in terms of, so next week our webinar is on celebrating COVID successes. So that was almost like you gave me a lovely segue there.
I didn't know that, but that's great.
Yeah, so anyone that's on here today, if you want to share, if you've done something really well, we've pretty much finalised it, but if you've got something amazing, please get in touch with me after. I'll share the link to the gaming webinar as well, because I know someone's just asked for that. And in terms of what Stu said about networking, I'm always happy to facilitate introductions. So if you're feeling isolated, or you feel like you need an outside perspective from your organisation, get in touch with me and I'll try and match you with someone in an appropriate situation across the sector. We've done a few of those virtually and they've worked really well. Just time for kind of going back to Anna's question. So she basically asked, how are you tackling the uncertainty that corporates feel and the commitment limit they are willing to give for periods of time?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and I would say it's, you know, we would look at it on a partner by partner basis, but it really goes back to if that long-term commitment that we have with partners, and about us in difficult times being a supportive partner to them. So we are looking at negotiations and support around that for partners. But also, you know, tied into that, thinking about, well, how do we then, if we need to change those commitments, how do we then tie them in longer term, looking at extensions? So that's the way that I would play that one.
Great. Okay, perfect. Lovely. Okay, well, we're coming up to time anyway, guys. So what I always ask is, if you've enjoyed today, if you just share on LinkedIn that you enjoyed it, that'd be great. You can tag Sue and I, that would be wonderful. And also we do put the recording on YouTube, so I'll send the link to that. This is I feel like a 2002 ask, but if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, that would be wonderful, because it does help us as a business to just have more subscribers. And I promise we're not uploading weird content of me doing strange things. If you have any follow-up questions, I will CC Sue into the wrap-up email, so that you can get in touch with her and ask those. Obviously, she's leading a team, so just be mindful of time. And, you know, and regards to the mentoring and this webinar next week, I'll send through the links of that. So if you're interested in any of those, or if you need anything recruitment wise, please do get in touch. Sue, thank you so much for joining me today and putting all that work into the webinar. I really appreciate it.
No, that's been great. It's been great to be here, actually, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about the successes that people have had. So look forward to watching that next week.
Yeah, and anyone that's got any more successes or any feedback for today, we're always happy to hear them. And thanks everyone for attending. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and good luck to all of the people out there in their efforts.
Yes, yeah, it's all innovation, it's all change, but we can get there. We'll all be fine.
Absolutely.
Well, okay then, everybody. Okay. Thanks so much for attending. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.